Hello everyone, welcome to episode 2 of my Shmup tutorial series, Boss Fights Like a Boss. And for the newer players out there, you're probably wondering, why are we jumping into boss fights right away? So in episode 1, we just kind of went over the basics, the very basics of controlling your ship and reading bullets and things like that. Wouldn't it be more natural to start going into routing and learning all those types of things rather than doing boss fights? I think it's more intuitive based on your kind of previous experiences with other genres, right? With like platformers and other types of games where boss fights are always the most difficult and reserved for the last part of your education, I guess. But with shmups, I think diving right into boss fights is going to help you immensely as a player for a number of reasons. And so the thing about shmups is that routing is a very, very complicated and sort of esoteric process, right? There's no defined right answers. There's no, you know what I mean? I guess there's always the ideal routes, but even world record routes can be improved, right? Nothing is ever set in stone. And so for a newer player, it's extremely overwhelming and there's so many nuances that we'll get to that eventually, but I think it is actually more useful to begin your shmup education by learning the fundamentals of moving your ship, manipulating patterns, understanding how to move through different patterns, understanding how to read certain types of patterns. And that's what I think boss fights are absolutely amazing for. And so this is why this second part is all about boss fights, is because I think just diving in and grinding out boss fights over and over and over is going to build up your fundamental skills very efficiently. And I think, again, this is another reason that I think Touhou players tend to grow into these beasts of players later on, is because if you're playing old school shmups and all stuff like that, you're just basically learning per game skills, or you're slowly learning routing and stuff, right? You're very game specific. But if you're a Touhou player and you're grinding out hundreds and hundreds of Touhou boss fights every month or so, however often you play in Touhou, you're going to learn these fundamental skills much more quickly. And I think this carries over to cave games as well. So this is why I have chosen DaiOujOu as the example game, because I absolutely love the boss fights in this game. I think they are some of the best boss fights ever made in shmups. And so let's just get right to it, right? And I remember first learning DaiOujOu, just having so much fun, even though it was tough and frustrating, because the boss fights can be very challenging. But I think they're actually really good, especially in Black Label, to get your feet started in the genre. And so I think to begin with, we need to talk about how you're going to play DaiOujOu. So DaiOujOu can be played on a PS2 if you don't want to emulate. That would be my non-emulation recommendation. The issues with that is that the PS2 port is white label only, and so the boss fights will be a little bit different. I don't think it's a huge deal. And then also, they'll be a little more challenging though. And then also the issue with the PS2 port and the 360 port, if you're so inclined to punish yourself on the 360 port, is that there is no per phase save state option or checkpoint option, right? So that's why playing on emulator is such a powerful tool, because not only can you instantly load into the boss fight, whereas on console it's going to take you like 7 seconds every time to load in, if not longer. Whereas on emulators, like bam, right away, instantaneous, and you can also create save states per phase. And so you're just really efficiently honing in your skills much faster than you would if you were just doing this over and over. That again though, if you have no other option or you just refuse to use emulation, still go for that PS2 port, a 360 port if you're desperate enough, and use the boss select options. And so let's start off with talking about boss 1 of this game. So I do have a little pointer here. I'm sorry it's so tiny. I worked really hard in OBS to try and make it bigger, but OBS has some issues where it doesn't like to make the mouse pointer bigger no matter what I do in Windows to make it bigger and stuff like that. And so whatever, I might figure something out next time, but at least the pointer is visible. It's just this little gnat flying around. So let's just start off. So what I have done is I've gone through and I've created a save state for each boss, and I recommend you do the same thing. You can just credit feed up to the boss and then make your save state and leave yourself some resources and stuff like that. And so let's just get started, and I'm going to show you, to begin with, how I tackle this boss. So this first pattern is just the basic sort of swarm, and then it drops these bombs, and then it has this tracking pattern here. Well, you notice as I move, the pattern, the gun changes along with me. And then here's your first sort of eye tracking test, right? This pattern here. And then boom, there it is. So there's different ways you can fight the boss, right? If you're a super player, blowing up different parts, but we're focusing on fundamentals, and we're focusing on survival. So let's go back and let's talk about each phase in depth now. So this phase is your basic swarm phase. When you're a beginning player, all these phases could get you because you probably aren't super familiar with everything. So these pink bullets here are static. They don't really track you or anything like that. They just fly around and swarm. And so as you play, I'm going to try and do this. What you're trying to do is you're just trying to look for you're trying to identify the movement of the bullets. I'll probably die when I'm showing this, but you notice how these bullets are moving like this? So the bullets have static movements where their trajectories aren't changing from after they spawn. That's one thing you always want to start checking in boss fights, is just to begin with, before you even worry about yourself, you should be worrying about what is this pattern doing. And so you can see with these pink bullets here, they are being spawned kind of in these spread patterns, and they are not changing. They are just sort of drifting the direction they were spawned. You can see that? So as you play, what you want to do is you want to identify gaps that are going to form, both gaps that exist and gaps that will form based on the drift of the bullets and the way they spawn. So you can see right here, there's a nice gap, here's a nice gap. And then you also want to think about where you want to be in the patterns. So certain patterns are going to push you different places. This is a basic swarm, so you kind of want to be in the middle of the screen here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move into the middle of the screen, and I'm going to start shooting him in the face, and then also just keeping an eye on those bullets as they spawn, and then trying to watch for gaps that appear. And with these types of patterns, usually the more centered and the less movement you do, the better, right? Just holding position, keeping yourself sort of, you don't want to be all wild. You don't want to be flying around all the screen all wild like this. You don't want to be doing something like this. Like that. Don't do this. This is unnecessary and unnecessarily risky. So you want to just, with a lot of fights and stuff, you want to try and maintain your position, and you want to try and minimize how much you're needing to move. There you go. And a lot of patterns as we go further will actually start to punish you for wild movement. That's another thing to keep in mind too, is that some of these early patterns don't really punish you that much for flying around the screen and being all wild. But the further you get, you'll have to watch the behaviors of the patterns to see how they punish you. So I remember this second pattern got me a lot when I was first learning. So let's look at this second pattern here. We'll make a save state on it. So we'll get through the first pattern. And we'll make a save state on the second pattern. And I'll just... what the hell? Okay, make a save state on the second pattern. So the way this works is when these grenades drop, they spawn a static pattern here. And so what you want to do is you just want to identify what are the weak points of this pattern. So what is a pattern weak point? A pattern weak point is a place that will always have a gap in the pattern. This is going to be very useful when you start routing enemies and stuff too in shmups. I think about these as weak points, where places that will always be a gap in the pattern. So you can see here, my little baby cursor. See here between these two blue bullets? So between the bullets right here, These are the weak points, because the bullets are going to spread out and create gaps along these little spaces between them. So what we're going to do is we're going to place ourselves right about here. See? And then let's repeat that. This one went first. So because there are 2 bombs, you also have to think, I need to identify the gaps in both the bombs. So because what the game is trying to do is trying to overlap them on you. So what you want to do is, okay, so for instance, we wouldn't want to do this gap here, right? Or this gap here, because they're close to this bomb here, and when this bomb explodes, they're going to be covered. So we want to find a gap that sort of meets both, where we're going to be right here to dodge this gap, and there will likely be a gap formed that will cross right about here. And there you go, see? So now let's look at the third pattern. This third pattern's very good for learning. So this third pattern is a mixture between a tracking attack, and I love how Cave makes it very explicit that this cannon is tracking you, because you can actually see it move along with you. I love when shmups do this, when shmups visually indicate the behavior of the bosses and the patterns. So you can see how the ship is tracking, the minigun is tracking along with me. Okay, so the basic pattern here is that there is this aimed minigun that'll shoot these blue spreads, and then it has these gates that it creates. The reason why it does that is obviously to restrict your movement a little bit. So what you're wanting to do is, this is going to involve 2 factors. Can you see me in the hand cam? 2 factors. 2. The first is time, and the second is space. So time, because you want to hold still to get the minigun to aim at you, and then you want to move right as it fires. So this actually carries over into action games and stuff as well. This is misdirecting it or whatever. You actually want to hold still in a certain position to get this minigun to fire, but you also need the correct timing so that right when those bullets are leaving that gun and it's too late for it to change its trajectory, you can so right when the bullets are coming out of the gun, you can immediately dodge, and then spacing, you want to dodge into a gap in the gate. It's very elementary, but as you get further and further in shmups, this same problem will appear, just with stricter limitations, right? So there we go. So you want to aim. So you don't want to do this. You don't want to be doing this. Why don't you want to do this? Is because this pattern is elementary enough that you can get away with it. But the reason why is you're not totally controlling that gun. Whereas if you move here, look at that. So waiting for it to fire and then moving. You want to hold still, and you want to, for instance, you don't want to do this. What you want is you want the gun to be misaligned and then make it fire at you, and then you move very safely into your dodge. This is a pattern, it's a great elementary pattern showing a behavior that you will see over and over in shmups. So you get through this. If you want to be a cheeky boy, you can point blank them like that. And then here we go to the next pattern. So this one is a kind of a play on the first pattern, where it has these swarms just like those pink bullets in the first pattern, but now it will also start incorporating some aimed blue bullets. And so this is a really good pattern for beginners to practice over and over and over. I recommend you save state this pattern and just practice it over and over and over, even if you get good at it, because this is a fundamental dodging skill that will come up over and over. It's basically a classic. The classic is you have to keep an eye out on the static tracked bullets. Remember, these big chunky ones, they have bigger hitboxes. I talked about that in my video about hitboxes, where these chunky ones have bigger hitboxes because their shape, and then the blue ones will have smaller hitboxes. But anyway, so this is all about maintaining position, where in this pattern, kind of the safest positions are here and here, just from the way the bullets spawn. Maybe I can demonstrate that. See, I'm doing this intentionally. So if you're in the center here, you'll notice that this is a good example of too when the center is not always your friend. Because you'll notice here, look, the reason why the center isn't always your friend in this pattern is because they will overlap in the center, whereas they won't really overlap that much here and here. So what you want to do is you actually want to be here, misdirect these blue bullets into this area here, the safe area where you're minimizing, you're just having to really dodge one cannon at a time. Misdirect these blue bullets into this area, and then because the blue bullets are aimed, you're going to have to use timing to move over to here, and move over to here. This is the ideal way to dodge this pattern, like the textbook way. If you're good enough, you can just hang out in the corner and just micro your way through it, right? If you're good enough, you can hang out in the center and just dodge everything in the center. That it isn't about, this tutorial series though, isn't about just improving your fundamental microing skills and stuff. It's also about understanding how to manipulate patterns and how to minimize your risks in each pattern. So that's what we're going to do. Here, 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 here. See, like that? You see how that works? Now obviously what I do is I just point blank him because I'm pretty good at just hanging out in the center and dodging stuff. Like this. But you can see it's a little bit more risky, right, than doing this like this, where you're only having to dodge one set of bullets at a time. You can kind of play with it and see what's kind of maybe a middle ground between the two, like that. Or you can just hang out in the center like a big boy, like a badass, and do this. So there's lots of different... See, I got clipped though. See, there's lots of different ways to do this, but that's kind of a textbook way. And you'll also notice this is interesting about the behavior of these bullets. So these pink bullets are somewhat static, but they're not 100% static, because it looks like to me, we'll test this, that when they are spawned, the extremeness of their angle is depending on your positioning. For example, my theory is, just from just playing this, is that if I come up here, this is going to change the angle of these bullets. They're not going to all just stay exactly the same. So let's see. Yes, and it does. See that? So that's also good to know. So these bullets are semi-tracking, where their behavior is influenced statically, like their trajectory and stuff. But when they spawn and what direction they're pointing when they spawn is influenced by where you are. That's actually very good to know, because that will influence how you do your dodges, right? So with patterns like this, it is a very bad idea to do this. This is what not to do. Any pattern that has these kind of swarms where they track you, extreme movements like this, extremely flying around the screen like this, is going to aggravate the pattern. Whereas controlled small movements are going to mellow the pattern out. So that is why, that's a kind of a catch-22 in shmups, is, especially if you're a beginner, is that whenever you're kind of like learning and you're kind of having trouble, it's natural to sort of start flailing around the screen to kind of get away. But the way cave games work especially is usually the more you flail, the harder it gets. So sometimes, this is another good pattern to practice, because it teaches you to sort of remain calm and keep a cool head, and you have to keep your movements under control. Otherwise, this pattern is just going to get aggravated and keep attacking you faster, or keep attacking you with more extreme spreads. So we'll get through this pattern, and then it repeats the blue swarm. So that's boss 1. Excellent elementary beginning understanding of the genre in boss fights. But before we leave that pattern, there's also a fun little thing that you can do in DaiOujOu, which is you can start hypering the boss. And so when you hyper the boss, it aggravates the boss's a bit. You can see right there, it aggravates the boss and makes it attack more aggressively. So this is just a fun way to test your skills on the boss. Can you dodge it while hypering it? And this is not something I normally do so much, so you guys might see me get hit from time to time doing this. But it's basically like the challenge mode of the boss practicing, right? Can you hyper it and dodge it? Oh, that's a little early. Of course, you can use your hyper strategically. I'll show you how to use your hyper strategically here, where you can use it in places where you basically speed kill the boss without having to worry about the hyper making it too aggravated. I haven't done this in a while, so I can't remember when exactly is the best time to do this. But there you go, like that. But for the sake of this video, this isn't actually about routing out DaiOujou, it's about practicing boss fights. So the hyper is also nice because you can use it to sort of just challenge mode yourself, right? See, okay, do I have this boss down? And boss 1 I can beat hypering it, but some of these other bosses I really can't because they're insane, so... Anyway, it's just kind of a cool little extra reason why I think practicing boss fights in DaiOujou is fun, because you can sort of turn them on to anger mode instantly by activating your hyper. So there you go. Alright, boss 2. Ooh, this boss has a lot going on. This boss, don't feel bad as a newer player if you die to this boss over and over and over, because this boss is actually challenging. He's a challenging dude, but he's going to teach you a lot as well. So let's start off by examining his first pattern here, which are these blue spears, I call them. So I talked about these spears in my hitbox video as well, so it's funny how that connects to this training video here, where these spears are a little bit funky, where they have much more aggressive hitboxes than their appearance would convey. Basically, this entire line is a hitbox, and not only do you have to dodge the front, but you have to dodge the sides and also the back. So this opening pattern here is really good starting pattern for understanding. Basically, you have to predetermine where the spread's going to happen before visually seeing it. This pattern teaches you that you can't always play 100% reflexively when it comes to bullet dodging. So when you're first starting out, your inclination is, okay, I'm just going to watch the pattern and watch for the openings. But especially if the pattern, when it starts to get more aggressive, that's going to become more and more challenging, especially with the hitboxes on these things. And so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to predetermine in your brain where these patterns are going to open before they actually do. So I'm going to save state, load state. Like right here, right about now, your brain should be thinking, where do these open? Where do I go? From the second they spawn. So it's obviously pretty hard to tell, but you want to start at least making guesses and then correcting those guesses as the pattern progresses. So looking at this pattern now, I'm guessing they're going to open up right about here. That's just a guess. And remember, these overlap with each other as well. So it looks like it's going to open here and open here, so maybe around here. So let's see what happens when I do that. Okay, now we have more information. So this pattern is definitely opening up here. Is this going to open up there? I think it's close enough. So let's see. I had to move forward a little bit, but I was close. So that's how this works, is you're going to make, as soon as those bullets spawn, your brain's going to click on, look at them and say, okay, where are these opening? And then you're going to go to where you think they are going to open. And then you're going to adjust as, you get more information. That's the idea of how you handle patterns like this. So we're going to open here. Whoop, wrong button. So we're going to see them open here. So it looks like they're going to open up right about here. So I'm going to move there. And we're getting more information now. Look, so that first wave did open there, but that second wave, it looks like they're going to overlap. So I'm going to need to, remember, look at the trajectory. These are going this way. These are going this way. So you can see right here is probably where the opening is going to be. More information? No. So they're going to overlap here. So what do I do? What do you do in this position? You need to remember that moving forward is a very, very powerful tool as a shmup player. So what you don't want to do is move backwards, because you're going to get clamped. So what you need to do is move forward. And that's something, if you prepare yourself in your brain to do that, you'll do it much more effectively. So that's another part of being good at boss fights and shmups, and being good at shmups, is also preparing your brain for the input before it actually needs to happen. So for instance, you set yourself up in those two positions, and then while you're watching to see what happens, in your brain you think, okay, if it looks like it's going to cross, I'm going to press forward immediately. So you're just preparing those inputs in your brain, like on buffer. You're buffering the brain inputs so that when you get visual confirmation, you just act immediately. That's just going to be very helpful for you as a shmup player overall. See? So I thought about, okay, something happens, I'm going to move forward, not backwards. Okay, so let's repeat this pattern now. I'll do a couple runs in real time now. And you can kind of move along with the pattern a little bit. You see, watch this. So I'm guessing from their spawn, okay, they're going to be here. You can kind of move along with it, and then in my brain, now remember, I'm going to move forward through the pattern, not backwards. Forward through the pattern. Okay. Damn it. Wrong button. Last time, because I keep hitting the wrong button. Forward. Okay. This second pattern is challenging to me to this day, which is another blue swarm pattern, right? But now it adds another dynamic where the bullets are moving diagonally. In my opinion, just playing a lot of shmups, diagonal moving bullets are some of the most challenging to dodge, because you're dodging them on two fronts, right? You're dodging them on the tip, you're dodging them from the back, and you're also dodging them sort of horizontally because they're going to be drifting. So let's make a save state here. Let's make it save state 10 again. I'll just make save states 10 all the time. So here we go. So what you're going to do on this pattern, let me just get my bearings here a bit. There you go. See, I'm going to show you it and then I'll explain it. Let me do it one more time. Okay. So now let's go through it step by step. So what's going on is these bullets are crossing over. This is just a nightmare. You don't want to be in this area because look at bullets crossing left and right. This is a no-no zone. Over here is also a not good zone because look at this. Look at this covering fire here. This is a mess. And then also these bullets coming out here. This is just a kill zone. So you have to also look at the position of the boss. Look at the position of the screen. This area here is by far the most safe, right? Because it's creating distance. You basically want, in these types of spread patterns, you want the max distance from the boss and their trajectory of the bullets because they're going to spread wider. The further the bullets travel, the wider they will spread. So we're going to be in this area because of that. And so you can see the fundamental idea of this pattern is we're going to move slowly, step by step. Remember in video 1 I talked about time and how time and tap dodging are important, right? So we don't want to immediately fly through these bullets like up here because then we've blown all of our screen real estate too fast. So we're going to kind of tap our way upwards. So manipulating time by tapping upward, but also manipulating space by moving upward through these kind of safe area here, and then sort of around, hooking around as these bullets start to drift in. So that's what we're going to do. And it works just like that. Hooking around. So upward, upward, upward. And you can see the clearing. So let me show you not what to do. Do not do this. See that? So if you move too far forward too fast, you can make it through because it's, it's a loop 1 pattern, but it's just way more risky than if you move. See how powerful tap dodging is? Because time is important. It creates space. Time and space together. There you go. So that's what we're going to do, moving through the pattern there. Then it repeats the spread patterns. Remember how to deal with those. So this pattern here, I won't make a save state on it. This is just this is kind of a reprieve pattern. It's not that hard. What you do is it's another spread tracking pattern. So these blue spreads here are fixed. This blue, I don't know if these are aimed at you. They probably are. But yeah, these mid lines are aimed at you, and then it kind of flanks you with these pink bullets. So this pattern is created to punish erratic movement. That's why it exists. So it wants to catch you over here, it wants to catch you over here, it wants to catch you in a weird spot, because it'll wall you in. So the way you deal with this pattern is you hold your ground and very, very gently just dodge these blue spears, kind of sticking near them, because it cuts down on their spread. It keeps them controlled. So a way to control these types of aimed patterns like this is to actually kind of stick near to their centers or to their point of focus. So that's what we're going to do. And that's all you have to do, really. And then another overlapping pattern. So this overlap is different than the last one. So in the last one, I wanted to go up here. But look at the pattern now. Going up here is now a kill zone, right? Because the way these are moving, the way these are moving. So now it's shifted. Now over here is the safe place based on their trajectory. So that's something to keep in mind, especially with cave bosses. Touhou bosses, from what I understand, can be pretty static, where you can basically learn certain routes through them every single time. What's fun about cave boss fights is that you have to understand their underlying behaviors to really master them. And so we're going to look at the underlying behavior of this, which is this pattern wants to spread and track, right? So we're going to do the same technique we did before, just on the different side of the screen, and there we go. So let's make a save state. So now this pattern, this is a fun pattern. It can be pretty challenging. So I'm going to show you kind of what not to do on this pattern, right? Or some unnecessarily risky ways to deal with this pattern. So this is unnecessarily risky. Let's see if I can dodge it. Which is staying in the center, right? And that worked out way better than I expected, because it's loop 1. But yeah. So actually, this is a pattern that I want to show you. It's the first pattern where we're going to manipulate it very consciously. So what's going on? Let's first analyze what's going on with this pattern. So it shoots this blue spread and this blue wall here. And they are both semi-aimed, right? And I can prove that. So I'm going to do a load state, and I'm going to come over here. I'm just going to show you what should happen is they should be more angled the other way, right? See that? And then we come over here. See how they're angled? See, this is another reason why safe states are good, because you can just sort of see what the hell these patterns are going to do. And this kind of stuff happens a lot in Mushi, I noticed. Like, Mushi loves this style of pattern. These are like Mushi style patterns here. So these can be manipulated. So we're going to do a Mushi style manipulation here, where we're going to move upward and sort of shoot this corner here. You do this in Mushi all the time, and Futari. And what it's going to do is it's going to change the trajectory of those bullets that shoot to make them give them less power, right? Because what these bullets want is these ones want to be center so they can get full spread coverage. But if you angle them up, now you're cutting down on their spread and you're cutting down on their coverage. So that's what we're going to do. See how I'm cutting down on their coverage? And then the rest of the pattern is simply tap, dodge, left, tap, dodge, left, stay in the middle, and then dodge this shit. So we'll get to this pattern here, because this is another great pattern to practice on, but I just want to show you this manipulation, right? And another thing about manipulating like this is you see how wide you can make those gaps by doing that, and then all you have to do is tap dodge. Whereas if you're in the center, see, now you got to deal with, you see how, again, I can dodge both ways, but you can see how one is definitely safer than the other. And this is how I dodge the pattern. And then with the pink part here, So this pink part here, this one, you just micro dodge within it. That's all you have to do. This is like another kind of elementary, hey, let's practice micro dodging pattern. Which, you know, I love that type of stuff. So this pink one here, you just micro dodge within it. That's all you do. So let's save state and talk about the last pattern. Oh, a little early. Okay, let's make a save state. Okay, so this pattern here is just a classic swarm pattern like before. I don't even know if it's aimed or not. It's just kind of like the classic bullet hell. Lots of bullets on screen. Can you micro your way through this? I think it's slightly aimed. I think slightly. Let's see. It's hard to tell. I'm just trying to be extreme here and see if I can get it to move. It seems like, yeah, okay. Yeah, it is slightly aimed. But I think what basically happens is it just centers. You can see what it is there's this cluster in the center here. And then there's these side clusters. And basically where you move is where the pattern will sort of move along with you. This isn't really one, it isn't like the Mushi pattern before where you really can just manipulate it really well and misdirect it. This one's more of like a soft manipulation. And so what you'd want to do in these types of patterns is kind of like what we've been doing before, is identifying the weak point of the pattern and the goal of the pattern. So the thing about this pattern is you don't want to get into the corners because you need to hit the boss. The idea is to hit the boss and kill him before this pattern gets out of hand. And so what are the safest places of the pattern is probably beside the main center here. So not too wide so you're not getting pushed into the corner, but not in the center either because that's where lots of the bullets are. So this is just in shmups in general. Usually off center to patterns is usually a pretty safe bet as a good place to be. Depending on the most, you know, that's just kind of like a general weakness a lot of patterns have, not all of them. So you notice I'm going to move from this quadrant off the center, and then I'm going to move to the other one, right? So you're going to need to pass through the center, but not stay there. So another thing too that's really helpful to understand with these types of patterns, and we'll see it moving forward with more of them, is that when you move closer in an extreme angle, like right here, on this side, what tends to happen is it starts to move those bullets towards you, and it creates gaps in the center to where you can cross over to the other side. So that's just something that is going to be a universal skill for you in a lot of shmups, not just this pattern, is the idea of whenever there's these clusters, moving forward in an extreme angle like this will create a gap within the center to cross to the other side. You're going to see this time and time again in bullet hell. This is a very classic example of a bullet hell manipulation. So you can move upwards, make that gap, and then move over here. And you can see, let's just try to dodge in the center, right? You can see this is just not a good idea, right? Even let's see if I can get one of them. Let's see if I can get one. The pattern obviously does not want you to do this, right? But now let's try this, right? We get scared. Let's go to the corner. See, you can see the issue with the corner, right? Is that you're just trapping yourself. You don't want to do this either, because for one, you're not hitting the boss enough, and two, you're sort of trapping yourself. Obviously better than the center, but what you don't want to do is, especially down low. I was kind of actually doing an okay idea by moving upward on the corner, but you don't want to do this, right? Down low, down here, like this. Now, luckily this pattern is kind enough in Black Label to where you can get away with a lot of stuff, but you can see kind of these off-center areas are where you want to be. They're just the safest options. So there's boss 2. A very, very fun boss once you get the hang of him, especially when you have save states to practice on him. So I guess we'll end it to see if I can hyper kill him. This might be a... Oh, I don't have a hyper, never mind. Since I saved, just credit fed my way. So boss... Oh, that's the wrong one. Boss 3. One of my favorite bosses in shmups. One of my favorite bosses in cave games. This boss is a lot of fun. So, I'm just gonna run through his first phase, and then we'll talk about it. That's probably a good way to go. So this pattern here is all about tracking and spread gates. You know, that's a classic way Cave does their patterns. So I'm just gonna run through his first phase, and then we'll step through it together. And these all, I advise you to credit feed your way through to the bosses, and the reason why that is it will drop your rank down. So even if you want to be a good boy, I still advise that you actually credit feed your way to the bosses when you're setting up the save states, because that will drop your rank down, keep your rank low. That way you can practice the bosses fundamentally, because if you were to just like save state your way through but not die and stuff, then the boss's patterns are going to be more aggressive. So let's go back and talk about the first phase here. So pattern 1 is, again, another classic. It has these pink lines here that are aimed at you. Then it has these blue gates that you have to move your way through. And as we've talked about with the other patterns like this, the idea is to punish erratic movement and to punish wild movement. So we're going to do very controlled manipulations. Again, this is why tap dodging is so good, because we're manipulating space and time. So this one is interesting because you sort of create where the gates are. It's very, very tracked. So what we're going to do is we have a lot of control here. So we're going to come up here, and we're just going to tap dodge left, tap dodge right, and just do it back and forth, making adjustments as needed, but that's the basic idea. And for this boss, I almost always, you'll see between his phases, like shoot him right here. Like I always kind of shoot him a bit off center, not directly in his camera cannon here, the little arrow there, not here, off here, because almost every pattern of his is manipulatable. And so this, like we did with the Mushi pattern in the last one, it just throws him a little bit off center. It gives you a little more control over what he's gonna do. At least that's what I found. So that's how I always do this. You can see the tap dodging through. Okay, this pattern here is fun and scary, especially when you get higher rank. This one can be manipulated. I'm not super good at it, but it's just these diagonal swarm it's going to throw, and they're going to open. And it's just this is just a skill test, basically. There's not a lot of thinking involved with this, other than you need to identify the angle. So the angle is kind of like diagonally here, and it will be based on his position. So that's something to keep in mind too when you do boss fights, is always check the boss's position, because that's going to influence the trajectory of the bullets. So he's up here, I'm over here, he's going to kind of throw these diagonally. And so like we talked about before, if he's throwing them diagonally in this direction, the gaps are going to appear between the bullets kind of diagonally like this. So we're going to be over here. This is where we want to be, right here. And then we'll adjust as needed. And there you go. And that last part there is always just kind of like a clutch dodge. So let's get to the next phase here. We'll repeat these real quick. See him kind of over here. So this time, he's up here. And then he's throwing them this direction. So coming over here is not a good idea, right? Because it's beneath him, and they're gonna like kind of hook into you. So again, we want to find maximum space. So now we're gonna be over here. He's over there. And there we go. Okay. Let me make a save state on this pattern. So again, I'm always kind of starting the patterns on that little corner right there. That's how I personally like to do it. You could do the other corner. It really doesn't matter. I just like to move from right to left typically, because I just think on stick that's a stronger input than left to, it's like it's a more natural input. So I try to always set up right to left dodges if possible, because just I feel like I have more control over that a little bit. So anyway, let's talk about the pattern. I'm getting off topic here. So this pattern here is, it's got this gate here, or these static swarms of shooting, but then these pink ones are aimed at you. You're starting to see a trend with these patterns. Static aimed. That's very classic cave style. So the trick here is we're going to get up here. Again, this is very similar to the final attack of boss 2, where the center is not your friend. The center is just spewing stuff. So we want to be off center here or off center here. And we're actually going to treat this pattern just like that same attack, where we're going to move upwards to create a gap, and then we're going to slip through, move upwards. It's just a variation on that theme. And you'll see moving upwards creates gaps. I went a little too far upward there, where if you go too far up, it like makes the pattern vomit. You don't want to do that. You want to be like up in here, and then tap dodge your way through. Up. See? So let's see, like, you don't want to do this, right? Because that's why you don't want to do that. Because it has this point where it, at first it seems like a hell of a good idea. It's like, okay, let's just hang out in the center. This is all good, not an issue. Bam, right here, Cave's like, no, you can't do that. So you could hang out in the center and then plan to move upward, but the way I do it, there's a lot of flexibility with these types of things, right? Especially in first loop. But yeah, so what you need to be is up here and up here, right? Because the way it vomits there. And then you just end the pattern hanging out down here. So there you go. This pattern here is just a skill text. The thing I like about that next pattern is it's just a little reminder that you need to sometimes break focus for extra speed. That's going to help you a lot in shmups, especially in cave shmups, is learning to control that focus break speed. Sorry, I'm getting a little distracted. So I like that pattern because it kind of just reminds you, hey, it's probably a good idea to do that. We dodge through this. Then it's going to do the, okay, here, and then the last one, it makes you fly and focus. I'm sure there's a way to set up to where you don't need to do that, but that's how I've always handled that. And I think it's a good way to practice it, because a lot of shmups are going to test that, and then it's going to repeat. Then here we go, phase 2. So phase 2 is genuinely challenging. So the way I do it is, there's a lot going on in phase 2. So what I do is I start in that position that I talk about, and it's all about tap dodging and manipulating space, and there's a lot of elements going on in this pattern, so it's a little bit harder to break down exactly, so I'm going to play it a few times and then talk about it. And if I die on the pattern, don't laugh at me, because this is one of the more challenging ones. You can see I'm moving. The idea that I do is, those damn cheese graters, you can see I have this overall macro movement, right? And that's where it gets a little crazy. And I don't actually think, the thing is I always just hyper this part, so I don't straight up dodge it very often. So that's why at the end of the pattern I'm like, what do I do here? See, that's actually, okay, so I think at the end there, I just have to do a hard cut over. I think that's the idea. Damn cheese graters. Yeah, so I gotta get over sooner. You see between those pink bullets? Right there. There it is. Got it. Die already, dude. Okay. That was actually a good learning lesson there, right? I had to sort of figure out on the fly what the hell to do, because I never fight the last bit of that pattern, because I always just hyper it. Okay, so let's get started talking about this. So I like to set this up over here. I'm sure there's lots of different ways to set up this pattern, but so time is very important. Tap dodging is very important. You can see there's a lot of elements going on. The first are these pink chunker bullets, and then it has those blue sun kind of gates. This pattern is also a very, very good pattern to practice, because it's going to start pushing you to track multiple patterns at the same time. It's going to start actually asking you to track two simultaneous movements at the same time, which is a skill that takes some time to learn. Let me get my mouse off screen. And so the way you want to do this, how do you track two patterns at once? Let's talk about that, because I think that's something that's going to be a bit of a barrier for when you're first playing, because it's kind of a more advanced tactic, right? So the way I do it is your brain, at least my brain, cannot actually track two patterns at once. My brain will explode. I can do it for like short bursts of time, but I cannot do it all the time, right? I'm not that awesome. I'm not Jamer's level yet. So how do I do this? So what I do is I choose which one am I going to track more. Am I going to track the pinks or am I going to track the blues? The pinks are more dangerous to me, and they're a little more like aimed at you. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of start to learn the underlying behavior of the blue, and just sort of have a compartment of our brain that assumes blue will do certain things and move in a way, and then check real quick. So basically how it works with tracking two patterns at once is that you choose a primary pattern to watch or keep an eye on. You kind of try and keep an eye on both, but there's a primary one. And that is, for me, pink here. And so we're going to watch and sort of dodge pink, but we're also going to have a pre-made route in our head before the pattern even begins of, okay, we're going to move right to the left, left to the right, and we're going to adjust as we go, tap dodging our way through. And then we're going to kind of try and gain an understanding of what blue's going to do. And how blue works is it just comes out at certain angles and opens in certain angles. So we're going to watch pink, and then I want to try and do this in real time, so this might be a little bit tricky. Hold on. Okay, I'm going to try and point this out in real time. My hand's on the pause button. Here, I'm going to pause and just try and illustrate the points where my brain watches both patterns. So as you go through the patterns, there's going to be little bursts where your brain looks and goes, okay, what are both patterns doing? And I try and look in a specific place. So right here is where my brain looks and says, okay, what are both patterns doing right there? In one spot on the screen. And every time my brain does it, I'm going to try and pause. Okay, what are they doing here? Here. Let me get the mouse off the screen. It's very distracting. Okay, here we go. I'm going to try and pause this as I go through the pattern. Just pausing when my brain checks for both. Definitely right there. Okay, what the hell? Okay, we're going to move up. Here. 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 Oh boy. Here. Here. And you can see as the pattern gets more chaotic, my brain is checking faster and faster and faster and faster. And that's when shmups become fun, because now your brain has to work faster and faster and faster. But my advice, this is getting a little bit abstract, but I think it's going to get help, is that try not to continuously focus. Try not to do that. Instead, try and do burst focuses. Like focus, then relax, focus, relax, and like burst it. And I'm trying to illustrate that with the pauses. Like this is what my brain is doing. Like bursts of focus. So now we'll go run through it again. You have to watch those that back shot from the trail. Remember this? The trick of this last pattern is that gap in those pink bullets there. That's where it's gonna get me. So let's try that again. This is a very, very good boss fight to learn off of because of all the shit that's going on in it. It's like very classic, you know what I mean? So we're gonna move up, because remember, we're primarily dodging those pink bullets. And the blue bullets are just sort of in the way. And there we go. So I was keeping my eyes on the pinks, and then doing those quick checks to make sure, okay, I don't run into a blue. But you're sort of watching the pinks most of the time, and then burst checking your brain. It's hard to describe, obviously, because this is brain processes I'm trying to describe, not necessarily something you can put onto paper. But start just thinking about it in your brain, like visual, like maybe even practicing it, right? Like burst checking as you play, where you have this just what you kind of do is you look at you find a, let's just go back real quick. I think I've kind of illustrated this before, but let me just show you again. Okay, burst check. So your brain chooses when you do what I call a burst check. That's what I call it in my brain. Is you always choose a point on the screen to look at. You never try and look at, you know, the whole screen or anything like that. Your brain cannot handle that much information that fast. At least mine can't. So you choose a spot on the screen, like a very specific portion, like right here. That is where I'm gonna look. That, and it's like a quick fire in your brain. Just look there, and then, so you this is when people talk about, hey, when do you look at your ship? When do you not look at your ship? And some people say, oh, I never look at my ship. Sometimes I look at my ship, but other times I don't. I'm trying to put this very clearly when you do and when you don't. And this, I think, this pattern is a perfect example of when you do and you don't. This will carry over to routing and all your shmup skills. Is you need to know where to burst fire your attention. And right now in this pattern, it is right here. So my brain's going to go, bam, what's going on right there? And I need to just understand how to move my ship without totally looking at it. It's kind of my peripheral. I kind of know what it's up to, especially since it's shooting a giant laser, so I can kind of keep an eye on it. Right? And I'm trying to do another one. Here, that's actually a pretty safe. Here, burst check. Sometimes you look at here, what do? I think it's best just don't move. Right? Don't move. Sometimes you don't, when you do a burst check, also have remember I talked about buffering inputs in your brain? That's why shmups are a very interesting genre, because they're a very brain heavy genre, where sometimes the inputs, they don't occur on the buttons here, right? There's no input here that's a brain input, but you need to have the input prepared in your brain of, in this scenario, don't move. And this, like in the other one, the thing I was buffering in my brain was move forward. And this pattern, actually, I buffer in my brain, don't move. That's the input you brain buffer. Move forward. Ooh, I think I got through it there. Yeah. Okay. So let's make it through the rest of the pattern. This is why pause buffering is cheating, by the way. It basically allows you to burst fire your brain in a infinite time, right? Which is totally cheating. So that's why pause buffering is cheating. Because the timing element is part of the game. Okay, remember, this is perfect pause screen. So what am I doing here? Remember, we talked about tracking both bullets. So I burst my attention right here. This is where I'm just like, bam, focus right there. And remember, the goal is I need to get over here, because the way these are spinning, I'm going left, right, left, right. This is what was killing me earlier. So I need to get up here, get around. I gotta get up and around. And there's some urgency here, because if I take too long, I'll miss the chance. You know, and that's really hard off of pause, I'll tell you that much. But that's the idea. I got the dodge, right? Just I can get the falling ones, because my brain trying to catch up with the game. And I'm screwed. That was a bit of a luck dodge there. But yeah. So that's the idea here. So that's boss 3. An amazing boss. Especially with low rank, you can really practice stuff. Really, that second phase is going to really push you as a player to learn a lot of different things. So let's go to boss 4 now. I'm just going to walk you through this first set of patterns. They're very elementary. It's just basically, can you dodge this? Can you move through this? Just move forward through it. The thing about this pattern is, for me anyway, the way I do it is it's going to force you to unfocus fire to get through some of it sometimes. And it kind of clips me a lot. And the reason it clips me is because there's some slowdown that gets involved. See that? Where the slowdown kind of gets involved. That happens on the PGM as well. I was wondering, is that an issue with Shmup Arch? But it happens on the PGM as well, so I think it's just part of the game. Okay, so this is the first real doozy of a pattern. Actually, at higher ranks, though, this first pattern here can be pretty nasty. Getting close to it, I think, is the best way to do it. Like, I don't really have a good handle on this pattern, so what I do is I just get close to it, and then be prepared to unfocus fire if you need to speed up through it. This one here, this is actually a really good pattern to practice. I shouldn't skip over it. You're just moving left to right. The patterns are kind of swirling. The primary one you're watching is actually the blues, not the pinks, because the pinks are very, very easy to manipulate. So you can just focus in on the blues and on their drifts. See, that slowdown gets me, man. It has this kind of pausing slowdown. I guess I should like route it out to prepare for that, move back to prepare for it. So, whoop, let's not do that. Oh dear, okay. Let's get through this again. See, that slowdown gets me. I need to just move back for safety. See how it does that at the end there? That's what was clipping me. Okay, so this pattern here, because these pink bullets are so easy to manipulate, and they're so easy to dodge, you just have to, in your brain, again, this is another double pattern, but this one's much easier. All you do is think about the blue bullets, and so you concentrate on working your way through the gaps in them, and then to deal with the pinks, you just have a prescribed pattern, which is you move, back, right to left, left to right, kind of in that C-shaped motion from lesson 1, and that'll deal with the pinks. And tap dodging, because again, these pinks are created to punish erratic movement. This one you gotta hold back. You have to go to the back there so it doesn't get you with the slowdown. See that? Huh, whoop. Not playing super well, but that's okay. That's not the point. Sometimes in tutorials it's kind of hard to play because you're like stopping and starting all the time, so you lose kind of your flow. Okay, so let's make a save state here. This pattern here is pure positioning. I don't think there's much manipulation of what the pattern does on your part. Instead, what you're watching for is you're watching for the boss movement. Sorry, I'm trying to talk and play, it's not working. You're watching for the boss movement, especially this pattern. This is one of his toughest ones. So you're watching for the boss movement to predict the gaps. And this one is a little bit of memorization-ish, but it's also a little bit random too. So the basic strategy is you're going to watch the boss movement, and you're going to always try and be kind of diagonal away from him, right in that weak area, right here or here, depending on his movement. And then also you're going to be just constantly burst checking whenever the bullets start to get close to overlap. You're going to focus on that and then unfocus and move, right? So that's kind of how it works. I'm going to try and illustrate that here. Unfocus, focus. Okay, what's going on? Need to get left. Focus, focus, hold still. Kind of hard to do this. There we go. And that's how that pattern works. So whenever they get close, you kind of burst check to see what's going on, and then there you go. So this pattern here is just a fun little trick. It's all it is. It's just a trick. Sometimes Cave has trick patterns too. I'll show you what the trick is. So what's the trick on this pattern? The trick is just stick close to these. Stick like right here on all of these. And then when it gets more crowded, kind of stick in the center of this. And you just do that. Except I set it up really badly because I was not focused there. So that's something, it overlaps, right? You gotta sort of want to move in that C shape so you don't cause them to overlap too much. Okay, now let's do it. Okay, of course. Okay, there we go. Then we go up here. That was bad, but that's kind of how you do it anyway. That pattern you'll just get down. Oh, this pattern is always kind of scary. So what does this pattern do? Let's make a save state on it. Oh, did I save state over? I think I did. The final boss pattern, whoops. Okay, so this one has those chunky pinks and chunky blues. And you have to... So they have massive hitboxes, remember? This bullet type has got a big old hitbox. So the how I do it is I just line it up here. And it's all about just manipulating them. The blues are kind of fixed. The pinks are aimed, sort of. But they're all sort of delayed. And so this one is all about tap dodge. And this one's all about the tap dodge and just watching stuff. Watching how the bullets are going to overlap. It's actually a very fundamental pattern to dodge. You know, you just move your left to right and you kind of watch. I think there is some sort of setup for it where it makes it a lot easier, right? And that's something you can also do when you do boss fights too. It's just watch replays and watch for setups and learn those. But that's kind of how you do it on like a basic level. So this pattern here is just a formula, right? This pattern here is like very Toho-like, where it's just going to make you do what it wants you to do. You have to play by its rules, not your own. So you have to learn what it wants you to do, basically. Once you learn what it wants you to do, it just becomes a question of, can you do it or can you not? There's no real... There's some manipulation there. I'll show you here. Oh, I need to make a save state. So let's get through this pattern again. Oh boy. Okay. Make a save state. So this first bit here, you just move through. You just have to do this, basically. Like the pattern makes you... I always mess that up. The pattern just makes you do what it wants you to do. There you go. Just have to watch for when those guys... Okay, for this one, the real manipulation here is you just have to have the right spacing to create the gaps. Or if you go too far back, they start to sort of overlap in a weird way. If you get too far forward, you just get overlapped there. So it's like, you just gotta find the right space, and it's kind of like in this area. And you just stay this high up on the screen to sort of manipulate it. You'll see. But that's what you want to do. It's all about how close you are to these things to make them open and close as you need them to. So sometimes you have to move further away to get them to widen. Sometimes you have to move closer to get them to close up. So that pattern, that's how it works. Like, that's the primary thing you're doing. That's not how you're supposed to dodge that, but it worked. And just watching their drifts. And this pattern is very reactive, actually, to what you're doing. So I moved too quickly there, that's why I did that. I'm not actually super good at these patterns. And the further we get in this boss guide, the less I'm going to be good at the patterns of the bosses. Because they get more and more complicated. But I do understand them all fundamentally and can dodge them all on a good day, right? So that's how you do that pattern. You just focus. That one's... It's just a skill test, basically. You just follow those blue needles and then learn what it wants you to do. So I don't think there's a lot to really dive into on that pattern. I'm pretty sure I accidentally overrode this pattern, but let's double check. I did, so... Let's, you guys can see me credit through my way through. This is how I'm setting, I set it up. And the reason why, again, is to keep the rank low for when you're practicing. Because if you're playing through the stage and like safe stating your way through the stage and everything, you're gonna build up nice juicy rank for yourself when the boss fights. And we're just practicing, again, for the genre in total. We're not practicing specifically for DaiOujou. So that's why I don't want you to have, like, jacked up rank when you do the boss practice. This works, it's a little more time-consuming in DaiOujou because you only have, like, a few bombs per life. Oh, I'm playing Expertship, by the way. I'd recommend playing Expertship. Okay, here we go. Boss fight. So this first pattern here is pretty interesting, where you have to kind of... Basically, you have to kind of keep an eye on both patterns, on both bullets, but you need to switch between them. So after the blue spears go off screen, you concentrate on the blues, and then when the blue spheres are being fired, you concentrate on the blues. This pattern here, actually don't have good advice for it because I'm not very good at it. But yeah, this one here, I always kind of start here, and you can kind of cheese it a little bit by staying over here for a bit. Like, if you stay over here, you can kind of set it up like that. There's lots of different ways to do these patterns, I'm sure. These are just how I've always set them up. Okay, so let's concentrate on this pattern here. This is just a pattern of overlapping stuff, and it's all about just the fundamentals that we've talked about already of burst checking when they start to overlap, like here, and then also understanding kind of the back and, you know, the back and forth movement up here, and then over here, up here, and really what's dictating where you go are these little chain links, these little blue chain links, because they're nasty. And then, of course, you have to slowly sort of move left to right to manipulate the clovers. That's the pattern. And it just goes on and on. It's one of the harder patterns of the boss. Okay, so we got that down. The blue ropes. This is a very specific pattern. Or the ropes is what I call them. So how you do this pattern, this one is all about watching stuff and understanding. So the thing about the ropes is over here is just a death zone. This is one of those very game-specific patterns where basically over here is a death zone. Just never go on the right side. Always stay in the center and then on the left. It's like asymmetrical. The pattern does one thing in one direction differently than it does in the other. Sometimes you'll run into that. That's a good thing to talk about, is asymmetrical patterns where the patterns will always behave certain ways on certain sides than others, so there's like a preferable side to be on. So that's something you sort of have to identify. And yeah, this is an asymmetrical pattern where you just don't want to be on the right. The right's a death zone. Sometimes you have to kind of cross over there. But basically when I'm doing this pattern, I'm watching, I'm tap dodging, but I'm watching the ropes. And then burst checking to get around the blue bullets when they get close to me. But they're very easy to manipulate, you can see. So all your concentration should be on the ropes. And then this pattern here is just a skill test. That's all it is. And then it repeats. You should conquer this pattern here. Let's talk about the final pattern. Overlapping stuff. I'm not super good at this pattern, so you'll see me die plenty. The idea here, though, is it's just a prescribed pattern, right? This is a very Toho style pattern where it just does what it does, and you need to just start to identify the weaknesses. Basically, what you're doing is you look at a primary line to watch, and then dodge around that. Then you move positions, then you choose a new primary line. So my primary line was this one right here, and then I moved through it. Now my new primary line is this one here, so I watch this one, and then basically you stick close to one and then watch the other. So now the primary line is this blue one. I gotta get around the blue, and it's hard to do with these pauses and stuff, so you're just gonna have to accept that. Anyway, so yeah, that blue, see that first blue one was primary. Now I'm kind of in between both, so we want to get around this second blue one, but I keep pausing, and so it's hard to do that while I pause, so it doesn't help. I'm not super good at this pattern anyway. But you can see you kind of choose a primary line to dodge, and then you kind of choose a line to run away from too, right? So right here, let's make a save state so I can talk about it. So now it kind of gets more aggressive now. So now I'm going to try and make my way over here, and I'm just going to have to really up my concentration, especially with those, I forgot about those. So since these blue ones start coming in real hot, you want to kind of get to the left as much as you can, so that you give yourself time to react to those blue ones coming in hot on the left. So what we want to do is we want to get to the left as far as possible to give ourselves time to... Oh, I almost had it. Of course, there's probably a very prescribed static way to do this pattern, because I think it is static. But I'm just showing you how I would analyze it, right? It always, these hitboxes on these chunky bolts are massive. That should do it. There you go. So that's the lesson. So in summary then, what I recommend is that you just start working through these boss fights. You don't have to necessarily play DOJ if there's a different game you want to do. I do recommend DOJ as a great one to do. Try B ship as well instead of A ship, just because the movement and stuff is more easy to handle and actually a little more like universal than the A ship, which is really fast. And then just yeah, I would say just grind out these boss sessions. Just rather than worrying about getting through the levels and stuff like that, just grind out these boss fights over and over and over. Both in total, like do the whole fight, and then if you have a certain pattern that keeps clipping you and killing you, focus in on that pattern, work on that pattern, and just try to improve your consistency. Go from boss to boss, just like an hour a day, 2 hours a day. When I did my 2-wall, I would sit down and practice hibachi like 2 hours a day. That's a hell of a boss fight. So, and I feel like grinding hibachi for 2 hours a day for as long as I did really helped my dodging skills, and grinding out all those different boss fights and stuff really helped my dodging skills. So I think just grinding out boss fights is a very strong way to improve, because they test your fundamentals very strongly, right? That's what it's all about. Oh, come on. Let's do one more to finish the video. There we go. That should do it, right? Nope. There we go. Alrighty. Well, thanks for tuning in. Before I go, I'll thank my patrons. And I have a new patron I just saw today, so I'll have to add his name in as well. Joe Angelo, John, Kay, Quentin, Maz, Nathaniel Davis, and Electron, Omcall, Rysosis, Sugumo, Young Money Swee, Plasmo, Utakaya, Bahoy TV 100, Malaise, Meher Calendrian, Dingo, Anthony A, Ben Wynn, Brian Shiver, Double Vision, Deps 20XX, Dunpill 2064, EC 2151, Full Set, Retro Shmupper, Gus, Kiwi, Jacob Spring, Jake Ryan, Neon Daggers, and Scent Morat. Thanks for watching.